What's going on, everybody? Dottz Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you guys my top 10 tips for new players in the Elder Scrolls Online in 2022. I like to make one of these little tip guides every single year for ESO, and honestly, my tips for this year really haven't changed that much from my tips last year, but I do have a new one, and so I just wanted to make an updated version of this video for 2022, just kind of update the explanations and go through my new tips in case you are going to be starting playing the Elder Scrolls Online with that new High Isle chapter coming this year. Now, if you are new to ESO though, want a more complete look at the game, I do have my Elder Scrolls Online complete beginner guide, which goes over the game in its entirety from soup to nuts. Very long video, but if you want to learn everything that the game has to offer, feel free to check out that video, which I will link in the description below. But without further ado, guys, let's actually hop into our tips today, with my first tip being to not get caught up in endgame character building when starting. I make this mistake when I basically get into nearly every game, and a lot of people make it when they get into ESO 2, where they get really obsessed with the build craft. It's easy to do. It's very fun right off the bat. But honestly, it is a bit of a mistake. ESO build craft is definitely very intricate. There's a lot of pieces to it, and when you're starting off, you really don't have the experience to necessarily know, whether or not a build is good, how things should be combined, how they all interact, etc. So don't worry about it too much when you're starting. Focus on leveling your character, leveling your skill lines, and just enjoying the game when you are new. I do, however, have a set of leveling builds on my website, which you can take a look at. Again, dottsgaming.com, link in the description below. And I have these kind of like leveling paths. They're very dynamic. You can choose from a variety of skills in the skill list to kind of mix and match and pick for your needs and just test things out as you are new and learning the game. And then once you get up to that champion point level 160, which is going to be when you're at max level gear, you can transition into the solo PvE builds or the more endgame PvE PvP builds that, again, I do have on my website, dottsgaming.com. But again, when you're new, don't worry too much about the endgame stuff. Focus on leveling and getting your character skill lines leveled up. You can worry about the builds and buying gear later. The second tip that I have: don't waste money on gear when you are leveling up. Simply use it on your bank, your bags, and your horse. The ESO leveling process in terms of difficulty really isn't all that crazy, and so because of that, I don't think you need to go out and waste your money on all of this gear and get crafted gear and buy gear from guild traders. Like, don't waste your money on it. The gear that you get from questing, running random normal dungeons is also a really good way to get gear while you're leveling, is more than enough to help you on your journey, especially because there is scaling in the game, so it's just easier and cheaper to use stuff while you level. Where you should be investing your money early on in the game is your bank, your bags, and your horse. Your horse, you can upgrade it once every 20 hours. You can upgrade your speed, which is how fast your horse runs, your stamina, which is how long it can sprint for, as well as your carrying capacity, which essentially just gives you additional bag space. And typically the order that I recommend people leveling up is always speed first. Then if you are plan on doing a lot of PvP, I think doing your stamina is really important so that you don't get knocked off your horse when you are running, and you can also sprint for longer across Cyrodiil. But if you're going to be doing PvE content, I more recommend going for the bag space first, just because it'll make it easier when you're going to be questing or doing dungeons. Now, speaking of bag space, there is a bag vendor in all of the major towns that you can go to and upgrade your bag space. Again, very important gold sync early on. And then finally, same thing, your bank. Your bank is an account-wide bank that you have for all of your characters. It's very important to upgrade it. And so if you go to the banker, you'll see a little thing at the bottom. I can't show it here because my bank is fully upgraded. That's says, upgrade, buy bank space, upgrade bank space, and then you can, again, spend your gold on that. But those are your 3 gold sinks early on. Don't waste your money on gear. My third tip that I'm going to have is to get your free house and your armory. If you go into the Crown store and go to quest starters, you will see a quest that talks about getting your first new home. You want to purchase that, but you can get a apartment for free. It's a very small house. You can get it in a variety of different towns of your choosing, but the reason reason that this is important is for two primary reasons. And the first one I mentioned here is the Armory. It's a new system that came in 2021 that allows you to save build profiles. So you can have up to 2 free build profiles that you can save, and the Armory needs to be placed inside of your house. And a lot of people I've seen said, well, Dottz, I don't have a house, so I can't use it, but you can get a house completely for free through the housing voucher that is in the Crown Store that is also free, and you have to do a very short quest. So get that free house, the apartment, which also gives you a free fast travel point, which is also super good. You can also then get the Armory and place it in the house. Another good thing about having the house is that you can actually get these like trunks, these like boxes that you can also store stuff in, very similarly to how you can store stuff in your house in Skyrim. So you can take those boxes, put them in your house, and then it's just more storage space in addition to your bank that is also going to be account wide. The fourth tip that I have, and is going to be one of the biggest things you really should make sure to start off as quickly as you can, is to start researching gear traits as soon as possible. So gear in the Elder Scrolls Online has certain traits on it. Just using an example, gear can have the Divine's trait, which makes your Mundus Stone, which is this buff that you can get on your character, give you more benefit, right? Now, if you want to actually craft a piece of gear with the Divine's gear trait, you will have had to research it prior. So basically what you do is you take a piece of gear, bring it to a crafting station, go to the research tab, go to the piece of gear. Let's say it's a light helmet. You go, you click Divines, and then you can research it, and it will take, you know, a certain period of time. The item is destroyed in the process, and then after that time, you know, elapses, you're able to create light Divines hats. Now, the reason that's really important is because there is a lot of gear traits per piece of armor, and a lot of different pieces of armor you can get. The 7 body pieces for light, medium, and heavy, 3 jewelry pieces, and then 2-handed weapons, 1-handed weapons, shields, bows, staves, resto staves. There's a lot of gear with a lot of traits, and constantly making sure that you have at least one piece of research going at all times is going to be really important when you're new, because when you eventually get to the end game and you want to be able to craft for yourself, you'll have those gear traits known and be actually able to craft those gear pieces for yourself. Also, in ESO, there are these things called gear sets, where wearing a certain number of pieces of gear gives you extra bonuses. But a lot of those gear sets, in order to craft them, you need to have a certain number of traits researched. So, for example, if you want to craft, I believe Julianos requires 6 pieces known, you would need to have 6 different traits for light hats known to be able to create a light hat in the first place. So again, getting that research time going early is very important, because that exponentially scales. The first piece of research will only take 6 hours, but I believe your final one takes up to like a month. So it's really important to get that going as soon as possible, and as you're getting gear from questing, throwing it into research to make sure that you're completing that, so that when you get to the end game, you do have all of those traits researched. My 5th tip is going to be to complete at least 1 random dungeon and or battleground per day. You get some extra rewards for doing your first random dungeon in BG, with the most important one, in my opinion, being Transmute Stones. So these Transmute Stones are used to change the trait on a piece of gear, or recraft gear from the new sticker book system that came in 2021. So basically, like I mentioned earlier with those traits, let's say you get a staff from a dungeon that doesn't have the trait on it that you want. You could take it to a transmute station and actually change the trait from what you got the piece on it to a piece that you have researched. Again, showcasing why tip number 4 is very important. And so you can use those transmute stones to change that trait, and now boom, you have the staff that you wanted. You also can use, through the sticker book system, any gear that you've previously received that you've either deconstructed, sold, or bound to your character gets stored in the sticker book system, so that if you eventually deconstruct or get rid of that piece of gear, and then later on you decide, oh, I want to use this, you can recreate it straight from that sticker book with those transmute stones. And doing that random dungeon at the time of recording this video gives you 10 transmute stones, and the BG unfortunately only gives you 1. Also wish it gave you more, but that's 11 transmute stones that you can get per day from just doing your random dungeon in BG. And also, again, while you're leveling, they also give you a nice experience boost, so it's a good way to get some extra XP and kind of take some monotony away from maybe just questing or doing other things. So definitely something to do. My sixth tip is going to be to always scrap sky shards and kill public dungeon bosses. So sky shards, every time you collect 3 sky shards, it does reward you with a skill point. Skill points are very important to get because they are what you place into your active skills, your skill morphs to give them extra effects, or into passives. And so you need those skill points to be able to do that. And again, collecting 3 sky shards gives you 1 skill point. Also, killing a boss in a public dungeon, which is shown by this icon on the map, the final boss, will just reward you with a skill point. So again, while you're going through your adventures leveling, make sure you do these to grab those skill points so that when you get to the end of the game, you have enough to, make the character build that you want, as well as have some points for other things like crafting. My 7th tip for you guys is going to be to level up alchemy on every single character. Alchemy is the only mandatory profession that you need to level on every character because it is directly tied to player power. There is a passive in that skill line which is called medicinal use, and it makes your potion effects last longer. Now, why is that important? So you have potions in the Elder Scrolls Online that have specific buffs on them that are very important to your character and its success. And if you don't have this passive, these buffs that you can add to your character are going to be very, very, very short, and you won't have full uptime on them. But if you have the medicinal use passive, those buffs will never drop off, and it will last. The buffs will last the entirety of that potion cooldown. So leveling this up is extremely important. Now, I do have a complete crafting guide on my YouTube channel. Again, I will link that in the description below. But just a really quick and dirty version to explain how to level up alchemy in like 15 minutes is to find 2 really cheap materials. So something like scrib jelly and spider eggs can be pretty cheap. And then you basically get either water for potions or oils for poisons for the different level brackets. So, like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, etc., right? And basically what you do is you create a bunch of poisons or a bunch of potions to, let's say, level from 1 to 10. You then add a skill point to your first passive in alchemy, which lets you use a higher leveled water or oil. And then you create using the same 2 ingredients, but now that next leveled water or oil, you'd use that poison or potion for another 10 levels. Then you add another skill point, and then you use the next bracket levels of water or oil. So it's really easy. You could just use the same 2 ingredients, but scale up the water or oil while adding in that skill point each time until you eventually get to level 50 alchemy. Very quick to do, not overly expensive. So, again, a good reason to also save your money and not waste it on gear, because leveling up alchemy when you get to endgame, before you start getting into that content, is going to be really, really important. But again, if you want a little bit more of a detailed explanation, I do have that complete crafting guide. Now, my tip number 8 is going to be to deconstruct, do not vendor gear and enchants you either do not need for research, or that you can't wear while leveling. Don't vendor the gear. It doesn't really sell for all that much in ESO. The most important thing to do is to deconstruct the gear. And the reason that's important is because, number 1, it levels up your crafting professions. Deconstruction is the best way to level up 90% of the crafting professions in the game. So deconstructing light, medium, heavy armor, weapons, shields, enchants, it's super important to be able to not only actually level up those skill lines, but B, you get the materials from deconstructing things, which if you have ESO Plus in the craft bag is really good because it allows you to build up that reservoir of materials over time. The third thing is that it also, if it's a gear set piece, it will bind it to your sticker book so that you can start collecting those gear sets to create later on. There's just so much benefit to deconstructing gear over vendoring it that I don't recommend vendoring gear at all. But again, don't deconstruct gear that you can use for research. Always prioritize research first and foremost, because it ties in to not only the recreation of pieces as well as the transmutation of pieces through that system that I mentioned earlier. It's also important for crafting gear sets for yourself later on, which, trust me, is way, way cheaper than trying to get someone to craft things for you. My 9th tip is going to be to pick up the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, and Undaunted immediately. These are 3 NPC guilds that were included in the base game that, again, are directly tied to player power and give you some really, really good benefits. The Fighters Guild offers a lot of good benefit for stamina type builds, which are physical damage dealing builds. The Mages Guild is really, really strong for Magicka type builds, aka magical damage dealing builds. And then the Undaunted is great for just literally everybody because of the passives that come from that skill line. Now, again, I also do have a guide on how to level up these 3 guilds, which once again, I will link in the description below. But these guilds are really important to pick up early on because the Fighters Guild, you level it up by just killing undead. There's a lot of undead out in the world, so as you quest, it'll be really good for you to be able to simply kill those undead and level up the skill line. The Mages Guild is level up through discovering lore books, which again, very easy to just find while you're questing and leveling, so it's good to do this while you're leveling as opposed to having to go back and do it later and just mindlessly run around zones that you've already been in collecting books. And then the last one is the Undaunted. This is done through playing dungeons and doing dungeon achievements. And so if you're doing those daily dungeons like I mentioned earlier in the guide, you'll get some Undaunted levels while you are just leveling up, completing those various dungeons and getting the achievements for them. But for the Undaunted, you simply just need to go to a town, any of the inns in any major town, like the 3 starter towns such as Davin's Watch, Daggerfall, and Volkel Guard. You go to the inns there, talk to the Undaunted, pick up the quest, go to the dungeon, go back, turn it in, and hooray, you're part of the Undaunted. And again, doing those dungeons will level up that skill line. But again, for a more in-depth look about how to level these up, feel free to check out that guide that I mentioned in the description below. Now, my final tip for this video, guys, is going to be, especially if you're new, complete the main quest, the main Molag Bal quest. So basically what's going to happen is that anytime you go to a major city, a hooded figure is going to appear and try to talk to you. This is the original base game story quest. I do highly recommend speaking to this NPC because when you talk to them, they will give you the breadcrumb quest to get you into that main story. Now, why is this story important to do? Every single quest in the main story not only gives you a ton of experience, most importantly, it gives you a skill point. So you get a lot of skill points simply from completing this main quest, and you also level up the soul magic skill line if you were to ever hypothetically want to use soul trap or the ultimate that comes from the skill line. So very good to pick this up. Good way to get those experience points as well as those skill points from simply doing a main quest line that's going to be really beneficial for you to do while you level up anyway. But guys, that is going to be it for me today. Those are currently my top 10 tips for new players in the Elder Scrolls Online. If you are a veteran player, do you have any tips for new people that are just coming to the game? Feel free to leave those tips down in that comment section below. And again, if you guys have any questions for me, feel free to ask them here, leave them down in the comments. And again, I highly recommend, if you are new, checking out especially that complete beginner guide that I have linked in the description. It'll be extremely helpful for you in getting started in your journey, as well as checking out the builds on my website, dottsgaming.com. And if you guys did find this helpful, really would appreciate it if you smacked a like on it. It does help me a lot in the YouTube algorithm. And for more ESO content, as well as other MMORPG reviews, is it worth playing videos, first impressions, etc., feel free to hit that sub button as well as the bell to keep those notifications on. And if you guys do want to support the channel, feel free to join using the membership button below this video. Now, guys, I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I'm Dottz Gaming, and I'll see you all next time.